It was a thing. It existed. Hello,
Hello, brother.
Mantis time.
Does that put you in the mood?
It does.
Does
I'm
the
in the
sound of
mood.
my voice put you in the mood to talk about
Yeah.
tabletop role playing games?
Yeah, it does put me in the mood to talk about role playing games. And weirdly enough, eat franchises. I don't know.
What's that old saying on the Jaunty Mantis? The words on our third and final t-shirt. I live, laugh, love that for you, Jesse.
Mm-hmm. Technically content.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming.
What's coming? Oh,
The
we're okay. Apparently
the
something
final
else is working for
episode
you.
of our season.
Oh, I thought I thought you meant like the final episode of the Jaunty Mantis.
No, I'm not ready to quit this. We're gonna
The
do a live episode. Come
the
on.
the one where we get along. It's not going to be done live. There's not going to be a studio audience.
Well, I
We're just
mean,
going to
like
do it in person.
we're gonna do an in-person episode, which counts as live because you're
No,
my audience.
there's no audience. We're both co-hostings
No. Who are we hosting then?
each other. We're co-hosts.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Which one of these are we talking about? The core book, the Champions of Order, or the Stars and Scales?
I think we're talking about the core book. In a radical twist, we're going to talk about a 30-page one's faction specific PDF.
Please. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, welcome, and well met to the Jaunty Mantis. This is a podcast. It's about tabletop role-playing games. It's about two curious gamers asking each other creative questions about our unique hobby that we really love and enjoy. And we would like to share that with you this week, as every week. I'm your co-host, Matty, and with me is my beautiful co-host, Jesse.
Hail, well met from the realm of Azir.
That's right. We're doing our final episode of season 3 with the book that I think kind of started this idea off to begin with, if I may be so bold.
Yes,
Is that correct, Jesse? Is that a correct
long
assessment?
ago in the realms and the age of myth, when Sigmar took the fragments of the world that was. I don't know how long I can keep that up.
Yeah.
I almost burped into a mic.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, it was a while ago. But we were talking about this and we're like, we should review that book.
Yeah, yeah. And we are reviewing Warhammer Age of Sigmar
Soulbound.
Soulbound.
I'm soul bound. Do 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 do.
And we left this one for last because we figured this would be the easiest one to talk about because we both love it. And although I am a bit salty around this book, and I don't know if I mentioned that on one of the bonus episodes, but Jesse shared this game with me via our gaming group, and I got really into it, struggled with my character, and then through early days of our podcast, you may have heard an episode where we figure it out a little bit for me. And then I came to love my character, and Jesse was like, I'll play riffs now. I'll run riffs. And so we did a vote in our gaming group to change from this to something else, being riffs. And I was the lone vote against. There was one vote of abstention, but I was the specific lone voice of resistance. And it was because I was like, God damn it, I love this book. I love this game. And I feel like I finally got into my character. Why are you taking that away from me, Jesse, you son of a bitch?
It's a classic Jesse rug pull because there's more games to be played, like ones that I played in the 90s as a teenager,
Yep.
like Riffs.
Mm-hmm.
Their innovative mechanics and fantastic indexing is going to compete with Soulbound. Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I mean, look, everybody else in the group, except for one who abstained, was all about changing, you know. So I was comfortable in my ability to vocalize my point of resistance.
They weren't really digging the mystery, and that was a session zero uh, campaign prep fail on my part for not laying that out.
Mm-hmm. Well, well, here we are nonetheless.
Yes.
I hope to return to this game at some point. I hope to run this game at some point. And I think that's hilarious because everybody else in our gaming group actually has the context of the setting because y'all paint little toys and put them on tables. You guys play the miniature game that this came from, essentially. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. What used to be Warhammer Fantasy, but is now the Age of Sigmar. Warhammer, the Age of Sigmar.
Right. So, I'm a little surprised that I got into it as much as I did because I didn't have the context that the rest of you did uh in playing this game.
And for the audience in the know, he played a Stormcast.
Mm-hmm.
The Sigmarine.
Sigmarine, is that what they're called?
When they came out with the whole Age of Sigmar, of course, salty hobbyists on the internet were calling the Stormcast Sigmarines because they're like space marines from
Mm-hmm.
40K, but for Sigmar.
Oh,
It was
weird.
quite clever.
Weird. Nerds on the internet had a problem with something.
I know. And just assumed they were right. Uh
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird.
Well, all right. So give us a brief overview of Warhammer Age of Sigmar
Sure.
role-playing game.
Warhammer Soulbound, the Age of Sigmar role-playing game.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of those is the correct title. I couldn't find my core book. So uh yeah, it is a role-playing game that is a bit more on the heroic scale of RPGs. It is very high magic, very high fantasy. And you play in the default core setting one of the races of order, which are basically in the Age of Sigmar world, people who build cities and don't just tear them down and are
Mm-hmm.
not dead and not devoted to chaos. So they're not all nice people, but they are all people that like build cities and create order. Whether those are the weird version of elves or elves, because Games Workshop changed the spelling to copyright everything, or the dwarves, now also known as the Dwarden, um, or a Stormcast Eternal, or one of the people of the free cities. You are bound. This is a campaign conceit. One of the gods or some great potent force bound your souls together for a purpose. Uh, so there's your campaign hook. And it uses a pretty interesting D6 system for conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And it's this very high fantasy world where like there are these different, this is so hard because I have so many decades of knowledge about the old world that went into it, and I'm like, light and breezy, don't explain that Haish is the realm of light, however,
Yeah.
where Nagash rules in the okay, yeah. Akshi is fire. Okay, so there's a bunch of different kinds of magic.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these different types of magic have created their own sort of world, or plane of existence, is probably a better way to think about it, where
Mm-hmm.
that element infuses sort of everything. So Akshi, the realm of fire, is where everything's hot and dry and deserts and fire stuff. And the realm of light, everything is clear and bright. And, the realm of death is a really lovely place to vacation. Um, Yeah, so that's the setting. And there was this age of myth where there were all these grand cities and empires, and then chaos, the ruinous powers found their way into this world and corrupted it. And Sigmar, the highest of human gods, withdrew to the realm of Aesir, the realm of the heavens, and sealed the gates, and quietly came up with a plan to kick Chaos's ass. And then when he was ready, he did it. And it worked for a while, but then there were old conflicts. So there's a lot of really high fantasy, high concept stuff, the working of gods who you can meet, um,
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot in this world.
Yeah, one of the things I want to point out is that in Dungeons and Dragons, at least in the old days, with alignment, if we're being honest, that was really a good versus evil paradigm in Dungeons and Dragons. Alignment was. In my play experience with the hobby, law and chaos really took a back seat. The struggles were good versus evil. Sometimes law and chaos came into that paradigm, but we knew who the major players were. And I think that's one of the really neat, unique things about this setting is that the order versus chaos dynamic is what takes that paradigm center stage. And you start to learn very quickly that, like, there's not really a whole lot of good people in this
No.
setting, if any.
For as high magic and high fantasy as it is also it's a Warhammer game, so it's pretty gritty. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of our PCs in the campaign I ran was like a full-on priestess of murder and blood.
Mm-hmm. Does this count as grimdark to you, even though it is so high fantasy?
I think no, and here's why. The consequences for your PCs aren't terribly dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really hard time finding a fight or encounter that would put the fear into y'all
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because your power level was just it was really hard to adjudicate an encounter that was going to be taxing and
Mm-hmm.
not just straight outright murder you. So,
I mean, everything's scary as fuck, right? Like the fucking what, that monster tree in the forest that's like tearing pieces of my armor off my body and like flaying my skin.
oh, the feculent Gnarlmaw, yeah.
Like, yeah, it's fucking scary as fuck. But what is the term then for a setting that's not grim dark, but has that same dread or hopeless feel to it? Not that like it's feels hopeless to play the game, but like part of the overlooked idea of heroic fantasy that is in sword and sorcery is that you are this like powerful force in a world of like chaos and violence, and it's yours to impact and I guess in the sense of Conan, like conquer, but in the sense of Age of Sigmar, it's like survive.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's a word for that as a genre. It's something that makes it pretty interesting as a gameplay experience.
Yeah,
Because if you're a normal person in this world, yeah, it's fucking terrifying.
right. Yeah.
Like
Like,
there's four main factions. Okay. This is the breakdown of the role playing game and then also the miniatures game. And there are expansion books that are out. So I have we'll talk about this at the end of the episode. I have an idea for a campaign,
oh, okay.
the next Age of Sigmar campaign. But so Order is the faction of people that basically build cities. And in the Age of Myth, Sigmar led the pantheon of the gods of order, and included some people that were not necessarily gods of order anymore, like Nagash, the god of death, and Gorka Morka, the orc, ogre, and goblin god. And they created this civilization and all this order. Chaos came in. Chaos is the next major faction, right? So chaos is utterly inimical to order. There was a great video that really kind of stuck in my head that when Warhammer Online, The Age of Reckoning, or Warhammer Age of Reckoning, was coming out, they're talking about like chaos isn't just dudes in big spiky armor. It's like you get cut and instead of like blood coming out, it's a mouse. Like it's utterly unknowable and twisty and weird. And the armies that serve them are called the slaves to darkness because they really have no will but to serve the ruinous powers they've pledged their lives to now. So that's chaos. And that's very much going back to your Conan metaphor, the warriors of, James Earl Jones. Those
Hmm.
dudes are a direct inspiration for chaos warriors. Um, yeah, so that's the Chaos guys. And then there's Death, which is all the servants of Nagash. There's a couple distinct cultures in there. And then there's destruction, who really just tear it down. It's just fun. That's the orcs and the ogres. Just, hey, there's a city, let's go burn it. Just for
Hmm.
fun.
Yeah. I mean, what do you have better plans for a Thursday night? Come on.
Yeah. So there's a tome of destruction and a tome of death and a tome of order. There isn't a tome of chaos yet. I don't know if they're going to make chaos playable, but each one of those books like let you play a different faction.
Hmm. And I think it I think it bears also mentioning that with this much steeped in lore in this setting, this book takes huge advantage of that. Like you aren't making generic fighter to play. You aren't making generic wizard. Each section of this book, as far as the forces of order are concerned, are giving you heavily thematic, very exclusive to their faction examples of play. And if you're gonna like if like you are basically playing, there is like a warrior version in each one, but it's uniquely and distinctly different. And for somebody like me, I found that to be very appealing because if you put a role playing game in front of me and you're like, okay, well, what do we do? And maybe this is the what do you do in this game part of the workflow. Um, but I think that's a huge part of the what you do is it as it lines up with your faction, you do what your faction does in the way that your faction does it. If you're playing an elf, there is a uniquely creepy, secretive side to your faction and how you affect the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge advantage of this game that it doubles down on its lore. Instead of just saying like, "Hey, make a fighter." It could be an elf fighter, it could be a dwarven fighter, it could be a stormcast eternal fighter, you know? It's like, no, this is each version of that is here in this book. And I really respect the shit out of that for this game. It really does help somebody who's not familiar with Warhammer in any way, shape, or form immediately get invested into the setting.
Yep. And I will say too, I've tried because I was reading a novel set in the or listening to an audiobook of a novel set in the Age of Sigmar, about like people who worked for Nagash, and they had this really cool concept of this one tribe that was battling against these chaos guys of Nurgle, where they had these like warrior necromancer priests, like ice barbarians that like summon the dead ancestors, and like it's like that's cool. So I tried to make one using the
Mm-hmm.
character creation rules, the non-templated stuff, and I totally did it. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like a dude who could say death prayers to like make skeletons serve him, but also like wielded a two-handed sword. And I was like, this is like awesome. Like,
Yeah. I think that's a really important point because not only are you pointed in certain directions, but it's not like they keep the character creation process a secret. It's very expansive. They show you how it works. So if you wanted to make something customized, if you wanted to go outside of the templates, you totally could.
yeah. And it's like there's enough mechanical difference, but because there's only three ability scores
Mm-hmm.
that you're building off of, it's really, really easy to do what you need to do to get it done. You just pick like two or three talents as a package and then go.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, for most things, you would never even need to do that because you just pick a starting template, or an archetype, and then there you go. You're a Dwarden Indran rigger who
Mm-hmm.
hovers around in with a sky balloon, um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or
the
you're
Sky
one of
Rigger.
the 10,000 different chambers of Stormcast Eternal, uh, or you're a
Yeah.
Lumineth Realm Lord. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and for
What's
those of you who do know the miniatures game, one of the things that you do in the miniatures game is there's like a sub faction of your army, right? So like they have their own special mechanic and rules. Like if we're playing the Stormcast Eternals and we're this chamber or this storm host, we get a special rule because this storm host specializes in this kind of combat. The Champions of Order book brings that in too for the core
Hmm.
book. So you can be like, oh no, I'm this, I'm a Dwarden of this sky city. Like,
Hmm.
like, oh, that's really cool how they did it. So it feels like you are a person that could be, if you have an army for Age of Sigmar, you could make a dude right out of your army and be like, this
Right.
is my character in the role playing game.
Yeah, and I really feel like that's kind of the flex of a game like this is, this is it having that kind of appeal to it. Like maybe this is going to sound like a stupid question, and audience, please forgive me for this, but could you essentially play the miniatures war game and then zero in like really up close into like let's just say uh like an ops or a mission and just play characters essentially out of your army made by this game and play a more like, down to earth upfront, you know, you know what I'm trying to get at? Like,
So what you're saying is like, so you have your army, but then there's this book that comes along that provides you with rules for running a crew of people through the dungeon to
yeah,
infiltrate the castle.
is that this book?
No, that's how Dungeons and Dragons started. But
I know that's how it started, but that's not what Dungeons. That's not how D&D does things now.
no, yeah, you could totally do that with this book. You could totally be like, although it'd be hard, who would you play with? Because in Age of Sigmar, you're fighting everybody.
Well, forgive my ignorance on this one, but I do like a consistent setting aspect. I do like that there is that connective tissue. And I do like that everything is very unique. Like the dwarves, the dwarden in this game are very unique. It's very easy to fall into those fantasy tropes that Tolkien gave us and that were kind of, I don't want to say homogenized, but like I'm struggling for a better word by modern D&D. Modern fantasy is just like, well, elves are all like this, dwarves are all like this. And it's like, yeah, but what makes a dwarf really a dwarf? You know, beyond the Tolkien origins of these characters, what really makes a dwarf a dwarf? And in Sigmar, that's really obvious. It's very
Yeah.
distinct. The flavor
Well,
is very palpable.
there's like three different kinds of dwarves, like who are really distinct from each other. The I'm okay, just stop me at any point when I go into lore dumps. Like the Caradron overlords are basically to escape the age of chaos as the hordes of chaos were overrunning the world, figured out how to use this like basically floating gold to like carry their whole cities aloft on giant dirigible balloons. And so they just float above the world mining, like sending out these airships and mining, and they have this whole code of mercantilism that they live by, and they're sort of bastards. um, like sky pirate dwarves in these full body suits with like bronze face masks. It's very reminiscent of like Victorian deep sea diving bell suits. Like they're
Hmm.
really cool and interesting. And then there's the dispossessed, who are the shattered remnants that made it into heaven when before Sigmar closed the gates, who are coming back, who are your typical fantasy dwarves. And
Hmm.
then there are the fire slayers, who are like shirtless mohawked dudes that live in volcanoes and ride giant draconic salamanders and are hunting for the gold that is the remains of their god, who was killed as he killed a great foe of this Drake. And so they just take payment in Urgold to fight, and then they hammer the runes into their body to get
Hmm.
closer to their god and be strong and frenzy. And they're just like mohawks, no shirts, axes, fire guys.
He's attached to their beards,
Yes.
which I think is a great aesthetic touch. Yeah. And all of these are dwarves. Like they all everything you just mentioned fits into what we think of as far as those like base elements of what a dwarf is. but it really just kind of like this game makes it their own and takes it in these really interesting directions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What I
You
want
want to
to
talk mechanics for a minute?
I do, but I want to start with body, mind, and soul because
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to cause and maybe we need to do that bonus episode ability scores who needs them. But I I find it interesting that what we're used to is, strength, dex, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, charisma. And then some games are like, nope, body, mind, and soul. And I wanted to get your opinion because this game, boils it down to three main stats. Do you prefer the divine six or seven original scores? I don't know if you count comeliness as a score from back in the day. What do you prefer, the six or the three?
Um, I'm leaning more and more towards the three. I think I was on an earlier episode where I was quoted talking about with Rich about playing vampire back in the early day, how I loved how there were 9 attributes and each one of them could be paired with any skill to resolve it. And then that
Hmm.
actually turned out to be really unwieldy. So at this stage in my life, like, well, it's one of those things a lot of modern games are doing too, where they're just like, we're not even going to have a number that's like
Hmm.
a static number for a stat. Here's just what the bonus is. That's the only thing you need to write down. We
Hmm.
don't care that your dex is a 15. Like,
Hmm.
just have a +2 for being quick stuff. Like,
Right.
cool.
So you're more in favor of the three. What
Yeah,
do you, so just for simplification, or is there another reason?
I think it makes it easier to build a character and to understand what's going on if you're new.
Yeah. But what about for the experienced gamer? Like the
You can
six
start optimizing with all the options within that.
the six scores come from like the minutia of the simulationist, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're smart, but are you wise? Right. And then you start getting into weird arguments on the internet with complete strangers where you're like, well, wisdom isn't really an ability score. Like you gain wisdom through experience. Like why is that an ability score? Like you're either ignorant or you've learned something. Like there's no score that can like experience points are basically your wisdom score if you really think about it, right?
Yep.
Um I mean, I like both. I like the six and the three. I like having, the, I'm instead of mind like the cipher system does this. Like the mind category counts for intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Like it's wrapped up in that, right? The body part counts for agility, strength, and speed. And there's a part of me that wants there to be a separate score for agility that doesn't also represent strength because in my stupid head it's just like, well, how am I supposed to tell the difference between a strong guy and a fast guy? Come on. Like there should be something to denote that.
Well, in this game, it's your skills because the specific uses of those traits are actually determined by the skills that you pick for your character.
Right.
So, like, I mean, like, uh, what is it? I'm trying to like, I'm looking at a character sheet right now. Like, reflexes is a skill, and that's like you're being fast. That
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Determination is like, a skill, which is like your will version of mind or soul. I forget which one it is. It's been a minute since we ran. Might is strength. I mean, like each one of them is sort of tied to a skill. So you can narrow down the area where your high body describes what you're really good at.
Yeah. The attributes in this game are more of a core than they are in a game like D&D. Like in D&D, the ability scores are extensions of what your character can do. In this game and other games that have the three attributes, that's the core of the character. And in
Mm-hmm.
this case, like you're saying, the skills are the extension thereof. Like in 5e D&D, the skill system is laughable. I mean, in the sense of like it's not very complex. I don't even know if you really need it. There are other games out there. We might have talked about some of them that just throw out the skills in general. Just use the ability scores. That's what they're there for, you know. So in that sense, I like the skill system, which I'm a big fan of in this game.
Cool. Well, let me tell the listeners real quick how you use it.
All right.
So as I said, this is a D6 system. You're putting together a pool of six-sided dice to attempt when you attempt to roll something. And basically what you do is you take your attribute and your skill. Shocking, I know. So if you have a body of three and a might of two, 3 + 2 is 5. You're rolling 5 dice. One of the things that's really interesting is you can do breadth, like uh, DN is the name for like this is the abbreviation. If I say DN 43 roll on body might, that means you need a 4 or higher. Each dice that's a 4 or higher is a success, but you're going to need 3 successes to achieve this one. So like the target number is variable depending on the like difficulty and breadth, like, and then how many of those do you need? Which, is great for like time-based stuff and, you know,
Yeah.
getting people to buy extra dice. And then, so yeah, there you go. You roll your pool. If I say DN 43 might roll, you add your body and your might, you roll that many dice. Each one that comes up as a 4 or higher is a success. If you have 3 of them or more, you succeed at what you're trying to do.
Right. If you had a lock that you were trying to jimmy open real quick, the roll for that would be different than if you had a complex mechanical device. And I love having that reflected in the system because it really does um, add weight to what you're doing as opposed to other systems where it's like, all right, well, it's an open lock skill. You roll it, it's success or failure. The the GM may have you do it additional times, for it to be a process. But it's really just making one roll over and over and over again. And I like people love to roll dice. So I love games that are like, hey, you have to roll more dice. So I'm a huge fan of that in this
Should I
game.
bring in the spender real quick?
Mm-hmm.
You also have a spender called metal, and metal lets you, if you spend metal before you do the roll, you can double your training.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had 2 training in might for my example, and I spend my metal before the roll, I double my training. So that gives me, instead of the 2 dice from having 2 training, it becomes 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm rolling 7 dice, 3 + 4, 7.
Right.
So that's, yep. And then if I do it after, I can use focus, and focus, whatever my focus is the number of points I can add to dice.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've got like a focus of 2 on that same might roll, and the difficulty, God, I feel like, okay,
Keep
this is
going.
what you keep me around for, the mechanics. But then
I
I'm like, I'm
can't
just talking about
explain this
numbers.
shit.
Okay. So if the difficulty is, if it's DN 43, every dice that's a 4 or higher succeeds, and I need 3 of them to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I roll my dice. I get a 4, I get a 5, I get a 2, a 2, and a 1. Uh-oh. I haven't got the 3 that I need to succeed. If I have focus in the skill, I can spend a metal, or no, focus just lets you do this. You can just add your focus to dice. So
Mm-hmm.
if I had 2 focus, I could take that 3 and turn it into a 4. So
Mm-hmm.
I've now made my roll. If I spend metal, I can double my focus. So I have like 4 points to spend to just make the die what I want them to be.
Right. And I
So
think
more dice or fix your dice.
right. And I love this mechanic. This does take the players who are not initially familiar with it. This does take a little bit to wrap your head around because metal is also has a recharge aspect to it, and then you have to decide when you would or would not use it. But if you think about it, it's a very brilliant solution to a problem of like, well, wait a minute, we're adding more and more dice potentially to a roll. This is going to start to get really out of hand at some point. Like you're going to eventually feel like things are really out of control because you're like, well, shit, I got 4 or 5 things I need to hit for this really difficult thing, or maybe the number is less, but you're like, Jesus, this just seems really out of control for me. I'm rolling 5 dice, and metal gives you the player that agency over the die rolls. So I think it's a very elegant solution to what otherwise would be an exceptionally unwieldy problem of just too much dice. even though I just said I love rolling dice.
I think the most you could ever roll, I think traits cap out at 6, and then
Hmm.
like the skill training caps out at 3. So the most dice you could ever roll would be 12, but rolling 9 dice on something would make you like the best peerless expert of that skill that has ever existed in the world. Not
Hmm.
since the age of myth, since Sigmar came and taught the men. Okay, yeah, whatever. Um, so yeah, that's the basic mechanic, and that kind of works for everything. Combat has this other little metal refreshes in combat. It
Hmm.
refreshes like you get 1 point back every round. Like
Hmm.
when it gets to your turn again, you have a medal. You can use it to buy additional attacks in combat as
Yep.
well.
Hmm.
So that's cool. In combat, they do this thing that I'm like, I kind of like it. I think it's quaint and charming, but it's
Hmm.
definitely a nod to like the Warhammer war game, where
Okay.
you have a rating going from extraordinary down to poor. So it goes extraordinary, superb, great, good, average, poor. That is calculated from your skill and your attribute. And there's one for melee combat, there's one for ranged combat, and then there's one for defense. And then it's a ladder. So you just compare ratings.
Right.
So to that determines what you need to hit. Um, if if I'm swinging melee, I'm going to take my melee rating against my target's defense rating.
Hmm.
And if they're equal, I need a 4 on all my attack dice. Fours are successes. If my attack is higher than their defense by 1 step, I need a 3. If it's 2 higher, I need a 2. And then the other way, same thing. If their defense
Hmm.
is higher, yep. So once you learn that,
Hmm.
like equals 4, 1 less 3, 2
Hmm.
less 2, etc. The other way, like it's actually, yeah, there's no armor class, there's no number.
Right.
And then the weapon does like the weapons do on their own, they do a surprisingly low amount of damage, like 2 or something points of damage, but extra successes on an attack roll
Right.
up that damage.
Yeah. Yeah. And the coolest thing about it is that it works and it works really well. The part that is not so great is this on top of everything else can be kind of intimidating, but it is a learn by doing system. This is a role-playing game system above most others that I would say if you can just jump into it and explain it as you're, making your player characters do it, I think that that's better. At least I'm a learn by doing kind of person. So maybe I'm kind of biased in my reaction to this. Maybe we should have asked the guys in the group, but that really helped for me. Like I read the book and then was kind of intimidated by the rules, but then once we started doing it, and I constantly asked questions like, wait a minute, should I be doubling my training or my focus? Like explain this to me again. And it's like it really helps to have a patient GM like Jesse to be able to walk you through it again. And then when you need to walk through it again, you do it again. And then when you need to walk through it again, you do it again. And if you're used to more simplified role playing game systems where it's like I rolled the result, I got to hit that number, I didn't get that number, so I missed. This can kind of be a bit much than what you're used to, you know. But it's worth getting into. And that was the other reason why I voted dissent against switching systems because I felt like as I was just starting to pick it up and really get into it, I was like, I want to keep going.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
quick question. The enemies, they use metal as well, right?
Some
Or
of
only
them
certain
do.
kind? Yeah.
Yeah, this has a minion system like good old 4E D&D, so that those weapons
Best
that
thing
do
at
one
4E.
damage is fine. You can just wade through a bunch of plague bearers of Nurgle right up until you hit the Great Unclean One, which is like a champion that has its own metal and can do all the same things you do, and it's got like 50 hit points and like good luck.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's 3 classes. There's like minions, elites, and then champions. Um, Minions don't have elites. They don't have toughness. Like they just get hit and they go down.
Now, forgive my ignorance again here, but doesn't that evoke a similar kind of um feeling to the miniatures game of like wading through minions and dispatching them very quickly and then getting to like the commander? Again, never played miniatures wargaming in my life, so bear with me here.
Yes. Yes, it
Okay.
does. Because your leaders typically have a bunch of abilities and your line troopers only have like one.
Mm-hmm.
Your leaders typically have multiple wounds. Your line guys have one.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yep, yep. All right. What about the talents?
So talents, I mean, each book adds more. There's
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of different talents. You have a talent budget and you can just buy new ones with experience. And that's how you really specialize what you want to do. If you're making a thief character, talents are going to be where you do like, I'm good at backstabbing, or like, yeah, our murder priestess, she was really good at backstabbing and also leading prayer. She was like a bard slash murder rogue who wanted her biggest goal in life was to get her own cauldron of blood to bathe in. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that was not the player just going crazy. That was them leaning into the setting.
Right. Right. I love talents. I love feats. That's what really where character creation comes alive for me because it adds the treats. I like the treats, Jesse.
I
I
know,
like the cool shit.
and there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say there's not a lot of stuff that I think is useless, and nothing I think is traps. Um, like all of it has its own place, which is really cool. Uh,
Yeah.
so one other thing I ought to talk about too, from just a campaign in, because we're going to run to the end of our time. Um, the party has its own character sheet because
Mm-hmm.
the party has its own resource called Soulfire. And this is
Mm-hmm.
where it gets really interesting. We didn't really lean into this as much as I wanted to when we played, but the party has a resource called Soulfire that they can spend to make heroic last stands and do all kinds of stuff. But the party has to agree to let
Mm-hmm.
the Soulfire be spent. And if the party says no and you do it anyway, it increases this track called Doom,
Mm-hmm.
and like as doom grows, you just get to narrate things darker and darker, indicating like chaos is starting to win. Um, so yeah, it's just really a neat system with how they bound it. You're going to have one patron who's a god who's going to give you missions. Your party is bound together. You have to talk about this shareable resource you can use to get brief bursts of incredible power. Um, and then your party has a short-term goal and a long-term goal, and each individual player has a short-term goal and a long-term goal, and that's how you get experience points. That's how you
Okay.
level up, is
Explain
completing your characters and your party's goals.
examples of long-term and short-term goals. Let's hear them.
Like we're going to this city, like I have a cousin here, look up my cousin and punch him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Uh that's a short-term goal, right? Um Become captain of my own skyship. That's a
Mm-hmm.
long-term goal.
Yeah, like the long-term and short-term goals for my character was so the Stormcast Eternals, they get remade every time they die through the Forge of Sigmar, which is a fucking awesome complication to your character. They don't remember key information aspects of their life. And part of the long-term and short-term goals of any Stormcast, the way I understand it, is about reconnecting the pieces of their lives. And so for my character, it was like the host that they belonged to, was disbanded for some reason, and they had no idea why. So when they came back this eighth time, I think it was, or sixth time, like their usual group of people, the other Stormcast Eternals that were in their house are all gone. And my character has no idea why. And their short-term goals were around like, finding this house in the city we were in that was now inhabited by other people and being like, oh, I know something about this place. And did I used to live here? Or why would I have lived here? And it's like this, you can really play up the like cacophony of noise that comes from all these fragmented memories of trying to figure this out, you know. And I thought that was very compelling. I always love mechanics that they don't always work. I think they work in this game very well, but they don't always work mechanics that promote role play. You don't need mechanics to promote role play. People can do it on their own, but it is cool to have reward systems or mechanics for doing that. And I think that this is a very great entry on how to implement like at least long-term role play, and that's what the goals do for your player characters.
Yep. Yep. So you basically have a game where you've got a guy who wears golden armor made out of something called Sigmarite. And then the
Hmm.
mechanics are like, you can do memento in this, by the way,
Right.
and get experience points for doing it. This is Charlie. Don't trust his lies. Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. The other thing for campaign organization on the party sheet, there is three categories, and I love this. I love this as like it's like a version to me of the Mike Shea secrets from the Lazy Dungeon Master: rumors, fears, and threats.
Hmm.
So you introduce something as a rumor. Uh, if the PCs don't address it, it becomes a fear. If the
Hmm.
PCs don't address it, raise the doom and it becomes a threat. And then that threat's probably the focus of your adventure for the next time you play.
And I know this was a while ago, but do you remember what that was for our group?
There was a
Like,
rumor that plague hulks of Nurgle had been spotted off the coast.
hmm.
And then as we played, it advanced. And then you guys fought a plague hulk of Nurgle. Like,
Hmm.
yep.
Yeah. Am I remembering correctly? One of our friends in our gaming group created their own spells in this game.
Oh,
Am
yeah. It
I
was super easy.
so
Yeah.
go into that too? Because like I love defined magic systems, and then I also love magic systems that also let you create new spells. So please go into that a little bit because I don't have any familiarity with it.
They just have a category. So, like, when you cast a spell in this game, you use the channeling skill and mind, unless you're a priest. And then I think it's channeling and soul, or no, prayer and soul. Theology and soul. That's what it is. Okay. I remembered now. But when you cast a spell, it basically has, like, depending on how powerful the spell is, it's going to have a really high target number. So if you have
Hmm.
a super powerful spell, it might be target number 6, 3 successes. So you're going to need 3 6s to do it. But if you do it, you can like blow up a building. Um, which is actually similar to old school Shadowrun. Now that I think about it, how much you're
Yeah.
willing to plunk into that hell blast. Uh, but yeah, and so there's just a table of like healing effects, like how often they happen, damage effects, and it's like on 2 pages, and you can sort of cobble together any spell. And yeah, our branch witch of the Sylvaneth made a spell that basically gave metal back to you when you
Hmm.
injured someone in combat. Like you got extra
Hmm.
metal back, so you could do more attacks.
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked.
Yeah, it wasn't
I don't,
overpowered. It was fine.
yeah, that's what I was about to say is like it didn't seem like it was overpowered, It didn't seem like it was this game-breaking thing that they had come up with. It just seemed like a really cool, part of being that kind of character, and the way that we benefited from it was really neat.
Yeah, it was
So
equal in power to the Canticle of Slaughter that our murder elf would sing to make everybody hit harder in combat.
um okay, is there anything else? So do we have an aha moment? We didn't announce our workflow for we figure you've gotten it by this point.
Yeah, you're
Dear
lucky we didn't
listener.
phone this one in.
I
Or
don't think
maybe
we
we
could have
did.
phoned this one in. This game is really cool. I can't say that enough. Like the setting is really really fun and cool. The sense of dread, the oppressive environment, this like it's almost like a cosmic scale fantasy game, but still very well grounded in what we think of high fantasy. Like it does both simultaneously very 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 well, and I just enjoy finding other systems that can challenge, like there's no sameness in this game. That's a question we've asked ourselves in a lot of books in this series is, do you get a feeling of sameness? There's no fucking sameness from this game. And,
Nope.
and so the infinite level of play of replayability with this game, like I imagine people have like super long campaigns, multiple characters, multiple stretching storylines, just like truly epic shit. Where D&D struggles to get past level 7 to 10, this game is basically making you feel like you already are level 7 to 10. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, it totally does. I just want to say, here's my campaign pitch for the next one.
All right, let's hear it.
Based on Warhammer Quest: The Cursed City, there's a city in Shaiish, the realm of death, called Ulfenkarn, which is a pretty big city on the edge of this sea of death that's like all dark and wailing, like it's a whaling city. Like
Hmm.
so like foggy, mist shrouded, the sea, whale carcasses everywhere. During the Age of Chaos, a big chaos incursion was coming to kill these people, and this vampire named Radakar the Wolf offered his services to help fight the chaos. And sure, and they gave him this castle, and then he kind of took over the city. And so now Radakar the Wolf rules the city of Ulfenkarn with his like night Vostragi Night Guard, who are like undead ogres and shit. And the basic synopsis is he's not paying his lip service to Nagash, the god of death. And Nagash is fucking pissed about this, but he's not like pissed enough to go and wipe it off the face of the map. So he creates a soul binding of
Oh,
like dead things. So the champions of death, you can be a soul blight vampire, or you can be a ghoul, like
nice.
who has delusions that you're a chivalric knight while you're this flesh-rending pallid thing, or you can be a night haunt ghost, or you can be a white. Like there's all these like cool things you can be, and your job is to get into that city, figure out what's going on, and then bring Radakar to heal. That's the
Hmm.
campaign frame.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for bringing in a who'd you make there at the
Yeah.
end.
All the mantises, who'd you make?
Wow, Jesse, this book is getting all of the mantises.
Every single one of them.
I would also give this game all the mantises. Wow. Is there any game we've reviewed you would not give all the mantises in season 3?
I would give a vast majority of the mantises to Transformers, but I don't think I'd give them all the mantises.
So just to be clear, our scaling system is like all the mantises, none of the mantises, most of the mantises, some of the mantises. Like, is that like just dealing in generalized terms here?
I feel like I'm as objective with my rating system as we rate dogs is.
I'm
So
not familiar with that particular.
people send in pictures of their dog and then they rate the dog like 12 of 10. He's a good boy.
Yeah, easily done.
Yeah.
Easily done. Well, we forgot to let you know that we have an email. We forgot to tell you at the beginning of the episode. It's jauntymantis@gmail.com. If you have any questions about Soulbound, the Age of Sigmar, or maybe you've played it, or maybe you have some great stories about where you and your group have taken this, you can get in touch with us and let us know. And if you have any questions about any of the episodes of the Jaunty Mantis, feel free to write in, tell us all about it, take as much time as you want, but at the end, revise your work and keep it brief.
All right, well, get out there and save the cities of order from the encroaching tide of chaos, death, and destruction, or some shit.
That's right. Get out there and don't be afraid to fucking use the soul fire and some shit.
Can we use it this session, please? Just one person use the soul fire. It comes back.
Yes, somebody use the goddamn soul fire already.